On a quiet spring morning, the first light of the sun spilled across a small New England farm. The dew clung to the grass, sparkling like a field of tiny diamonds. Chickens clucked softly in the yard. A soft wind carried the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. Inside the barn, life had just begun, a litter of pink, squirming piglets, each one squealing for warmth and milk. But among them was one much smaller than the rest, weaker and more fragile. In the natural order of the farm, such a piglet would not survive. Fate, however, had other plans. The smallest of them all was spared and given the chance to grow. In those first days, he was carried to a warm corner, wrapped in blankets, and fed with gentle hands from a bottle. He drank greedily, his tiny snout pressing against the glass, unaware of how close he had come to losing the life he had barely begun to live. Day by day, strength filled his small body. His eyes opened wide to the world, a world of wooden beams, golden straw, and the faint smell of hay hanging in the air. The piglet thrived. His legs grew sturdier, his steps more confident. He followed his caretaker like a shadow, learning the rhythms of the farm, the early rising, the feeding, the afternoon stillness when the fields shimmered with heat, and the evenings when the sounds of crickets rose from the grass. These were golden days for the young pig. He had warmth, food, and affection. But as all young creatures do, he grew, and the time came for him to leave the yard he knew and live among the animals of a larger farm. His new home was bigger and busier. The barn was a grand wooden structure, weathered by years of wind and rain. Its rafters stretched high overhead, its air heavy with the mingled scents of hay, animals, and earth. Here, horses stamped their hooves in their stalls. Cows chewed slowly, their tails swatting lazily at flies. Sheep murmured to one another, hens clucked gossip in quick bursts, and in the shadows, a rat watched everything with small, glittering eyes. The pig was curious about them all. He tried to make friends, but the others were busy with their own lives. Though the barn was never truly quiet, he felt a certain emptiness, a longing for someone who might truly see him, not just as another animal in the pen, but as something more. And then, from the upper doorway of the barn, came the first sign that his life was about to change. A spider lived there, her web stretched like delicate lace between the beams. She had been watching him for some time, quietly observing his movements, his loneliness, and his gentle nature. She was older, wiser, and understood that friendships often begin in the smallest, most unassuming moments. The seasons rolled gently forward. The pig grew stronger, yet a shadow began to loom over his future. Word spread among the animals, passed in hushed tones, that when winter came, he would be slaughtered for meat. It was the unspoken fate of most farm pigs, a truth no one dared to tell him outright at first. But the truth reached him eventually, carried in fragments from stall to stall. It struck him with the weight of inevitability, a future that felt both near and inescapable. Fear gripped him in a way he had never felt before. Yet the spider, calm and deliberate, began to think. She had no power to move the farmer's hand through strength or force, but she possessed another gift, her skill with silk. She could weave patterns so intricate and beautiful that they could capture more than insects, they could capture the imagination. If she could convince the humans that the pig was extraordinary, perhaps they would let him live. Her work began at night, under the glow of the moonlight that spilled through the barn's wooden slats. With steady patience, she laid down strands of silk, each one a thread of possibility. In time, her weaving took shape, not just patterns, but words. They hung above the pig's pen in shining letters, visible to anyone who passed. When the humans saw the web, they were astonished. It seemed impossible, a miracle even. News spread quickly, and soon visitors came to see the unusual sight, a pig beneath a spider's web that declared him special. More words followed in the weeks to come, each chosen with care, each one adding to the growing belief that this was no ordinary pig. The pig, basking in this strange new attention, felt hope where there had been fear. The barnyard, once ordinary, now seemed charged with a quiet magic. The animals watched with a mix of awe and curiosity, though some, like the rat, took little interest beyond the scraps left behind by the visitors. As the summer wore on, the county fair drew near, an event that brought together farmers, livestock, and the eager eyes of judges. It was decided that the pig would be taken to the fair, not for slaughter, but to show him off. The spider, though growing weaker, knew she had one last task to complete. She accompanied him, hidden away, and began her final, most elaborate work. At the fairgrounds, the smells of fried food and sawdust filled the air. Bright banners flapped in the breeze. Children laughed, music played, and animals from across the county stood in neat rows for display. In this busy, noisy world, the spider labored through the nights, her body moving with deliberate care despite the toll of the long summer. When her work was done, it shone in the morning light, her finest web yet, glistening with the dew of dawn. The people were amazed once again. The pig received honors and praise, and with them, a promise: he would live out his days in peace. His fate was no longer in question. But victory came with a cost. The spider's strength had been spent. She would not return to the barn. She rested in the quiet shadows of the fairground, her life's work complete, her purpose fulfilled. The pig understood with a heavy heart what this meant. Before leaving, he took from her the most precious thing she had left, her egg sac, a silken bundle that held the promise of hundreds of new lives. He carried it gently home. Through the long, cold winter, he kept the egg sac safe, sheltered from harm. When spring finally arrived, the tiny spiders emerged, delicate as threads of air. Most caught the wind and floated away to begin lives of their own, vanishing into the blue sky. But a few stayed, their small voices and busy movements filling the space the spider had once occupied. The pig grew older, and the seasons turned again and again. He lived out his days surrounded by familiar sounds, the low murmur of cattle, the rustle of straw, the scent of warm earth after rain. Yet in quiet moments, he would look toward the barn doorway, where the spider had once hung her web, and remember her. She had given him more than life. She had given him friendship, protection, and proof that love often comes in the most unexpected forms. And so, in the heart of that old barn, her presence remained. Not in the silk of her web, which had long since disappeared, but in the life of the pig she had saved. The lesson she left behind was simple and enduring. True friendship is selfless, quiet, and lasting. It asks for nothing, yet gives everything. And in the giving, it changes the world for the one who receives it.